They didn't send her to be loved. They sent her to be forgotten. In the small frontier town of Pine Hollow, everyone knew the truth. When a family sent a daughter to marry a mountain man she'd never met, it wasn't hope, it was punishment. And Eliza Hawthorne had been punished her entire life. She stood at the edge of the dirt road, her worn boots dusted with the miles she'd walked, her plain cloak pulled tight against the cold mountain wind. Behind her, the town she came from had already erased her existence. Ahead of her stood the silent cabin of Rowan Creed, the man they called the Iron Mountain, a man rumored to have a heart as cold as the peaks he lived among, a man who had never taken a wife, a man they believed would never want one. Eliza swallowed hard as she raised her hand to knock. She didn't know it yet, but 5 years ago, in a crowded market, Rowan Creed had seen her do something no one else dared to do, and he had never forgotten her face. Eliza Hawthorne had been called many things in her 22 years of life: plain, stubborn, too loud, too honest, a burden, but never beloved. Her sisters had been soft-spoken and pretty, their laughter welcomed in every room. Eliza, on the other hand, was the girl who asked questions when silence was expected, the girl who spoke when men said, "This is none of your concern." That was her greatest crime. Her family said she embarrassed them, the town said she lacked grace, and when the proposal came, if it could even be called that, no one asked Eliza what she wanted. "Rowan Creed needs a wife," her father said, not looking at her. "And you," her stepmother added coldly, "need a place where you won't shame us." That was the moment Eliza understood the truth. They weren't marrying her off. They were getting rid of her. Rowan Creed lived where the trees grew thick and the air stayed sharp year-round. His land was rich, his traps full, his horses strong. He was the wealthiest man for miles, yet he rarely came down to town. People feared him because they didn't understand him. They whispered about his size, his scars, his silence. They said he'd buried more men than he'd spoken words, that his eyes looked through you, not at you. What they didn't know was that Rowan Creed remembered kindness. 5 years earlier, in a muddy marketplace, he had watched a young woman stand between a trembling old man and a group of shouting merchants. She had been scared, but she had not moved. "Enough," she had said, her voice shaking but strong. "He's paid what he owes. Let him go." Rowan never learned her name that day, but he learned her courage. The knock on Rowan Creed's door came just as the sun dipped behind the peaks. He opened it expecting a messenger or trouble. Instead, he saw her, older now, thinner, tired, but with the same fire in her eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Rowan said quietly, "You're not a joke." Eliza blinked. "Sir?" He stepped aside, opening the door wider. "You're not what they sent you here to be," he repeated, "and you won't be treated like it in my home." For the first time in her life, someone saw. The door closed behind her with a heavy thud. Not loud, not cruel, just final. Eliza stood inside Rowan Creed's cabin, her breath shallow, her senses overwhelmed. The scent of pine wood, leather, and something unmistakably masculine filled the air. The walls were solid logs, scarred with time, the fireplace still warm. This wasn't the home of a monster. It was the home of a man who lived alone. For a long moment, Rowan didn't move. He watched her the way a mountain watches a storm, calm, alert, aware of its power. "You can take off your cloak," he said finally. His voice was low, steady. "You're safe here." Safe. The word felt unfamiliar on her skin. Eliza loosened the clasp with trembling fingers, letting the worn cloak fall from her shoulders. Her dress beneath was simple, faded at the seams, nothing decorative, nothing soft. Rowan's jaw tightened, not in disappointment, in anger. Not at her, but at the people who had sent her like this. "They didn't give you much," he said quietly. "They never do," Eliza replied before she could stop herself. Her voice was calm, too calm for a woman who had just been discarded by her family and delivered to a stranger as a cruel joke. Rowan turned away abruptly, moving to pour water into a metal cup. His movements were controlled, but something beneath them wasn't. When he handed her the cup, their fingers brushed. Just for a second, but the contact sent a sharp awareness through both of them. Eliza felt it, a warmth she hadn't expected, a pull she didn't understand. She looked up quickly, meeting his eyes. Dark, intense, watching her too closely. Rowan stepped back at once. The marriage was done quickly the next morning. No flowers, no celebration. Just words spoken in front of a traveling preacher who didn't ask questions. "You may kiss the bride," the man said, already tired, already uninterested. Rowan froze. Eliza's breath caught. The space between them felt suddenly too small, too charged. Rowan leaned in slightly, then stopped. He looked down at her, searching her face. "I won't touch you unless you want me to," he said so softly only she could hear. The words did something dangerous to her heart. Eliza swallowed. I don't know what I want." "That's answer enough," he replied. He stepped back. The preacher cleared his throat awkwardly and muttered, "Well then, married." Just like that, she was his wife.
The first night, Rowan gave her the bed. "I'll sleep by the fire," he said. "You don't have to," Eliza replied quickly, too quickly. Rowan looked at her again, really looked. Her hair loose around her shoulders, her cheeks flushed from the fire's heat, her eyes uncertain but not afraid. "I know," he said, "but I want to." He lay down on the floor that night, staring at the ceiling, every sense aware of her presence just a few feet away. He could hear her breathing, soft, uneven. It was torture. On the third night, a storm hit. Thunder cracked the mountains open, rain pounding the roof like fury. Eliza woke with a gasp, sitting upright in bed. Before she could stop herself, she whispered, "Rowan?" He was on his feet instantly. "Yes?" "I don't like storms," she admitted quietly, ashamed. Rowan hesitated only a second before moving closer. "Come here," he said. She slid off the bed, her bare feet touching the floor, and then she was standing far too close to him. He smelled like smoke and rain, felt solid, warm. When thunder roared again, Eliza grabbed his shirt. He inhaled sharply. His hands hovered near her waist, not touching, like he was fighting himself. "You should let go," he murmured. "I don't want to," she whispered. That was all it took. He pulled her gently, carefully into his arms. Not rough, not desperate, but intimate in a way that made her heart race. Her cheek rested against his chest. His heartbeat was strong, fast. "You're shaking," he said. "So are you," she replied. Silence fell, heavy, charged. Rowan tilted her chin up slightly. Their faces were inches apart. Her lips parted. His breath brushed her mouth. For one dangerous moment, the world disappeared. Then Rowan pulled away abruptly. "We should stop," he said hoarsely. Eliza nodded, even though every part of her screamed, "Don't!" The next morning, the town began to whisper. Why hadn't Rowan rejected her? Why hadn't he sent her back? Some jokes turned into jealousy. Some cruelty turned into plans. And Eliza, the girl no one wanted, had no idea that loving her would cost Rowan Creed far more than his solitude. The town of Pine Hollow noticed everything, especially things that weren't meant to survive, like Eliza Creed. She walked beside Rowan through the marketplace 3 days after the wedding,
Her chin lifted, her hand resting lightly on his arm, not because she needed support, but because she chose to. The whispers followed them like dust. She's not pretty enough for him. She won't last the winter. He'll tire of her. Rowan heard every word, and every word carved something darker into him. A man stepped too close as they passed the trading post. His eyes lingered on Eliza, not admiring, but appraising. Wrong. Rowan stopped walking. The sudden stillness was terrifying. "She's my wife," Rowan said calmly, his voice low as thunder beneath rock. "You look again, and you won't look at anything ever again." The man backed away immediately. Eliza's breath caught. She had never been defended like that, not openly, not without shame. Rowan didn't look at her until they were alone again, until the forest swallowed them whole. "You don't have to protect me," she said softly. Rowan turned then. His eyes were dark, intense, hungry in a way that made her pulse jump. "I know," he replied. "I want to." That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. The cabin felt smaller lately, warmer. Every creak of wood sounded louder. Every breath felt heavier. She lay on her side, watching the fire die slowly, aware, painfully aware of Rowan on the other side of the room. He hadn't touched her since the storm, but she felt him everywhere. Finally, she spoke. "Rowan?" A pause. "Yes." "Why do you keep your distance?" Silence stretched, thick, dangerous. Then he stood. The sound of his boots crossing the floor made her stomach tighten. He stopped beside the bed, towering, controlled barely. "If I don't," he said quietly, "I won't stop." Her heart hammered. "Stop what?" Rowan looked down at her, really looked, at the way the firelight kissed her skin, at the strength hidden beneath her softness, at the woman no one else had bothered to see. "Wanting you," he said. The air changed. Eliza sat up slowly, her blanket slipping just enough to reveal her shoulder. She hadn't meant to do it, or maybe she had. Rowan's jaw clenched. "I don't scare you," she whispered. "I should, because I'm not gentle when I want something." She stood then, barefoot, steady, closing the distance herself. Her hand pressed against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, hard, fast. "Neither am I," she said. Rowan swore under his breath. His hand came up, not grabbing, not claiming, but cupping her jaw with reverence that burned hotter than roughness ever could. Their foreheads touched, breath mingled. "This is your last chance to step away," he murmured. Eliza tilted her head up. "Kiss me." That was permission. Rowan's mouth met hers, slow at first, controlled, then deeper, fuller, like he'd been starving and finally allowed himself a taste. Eliza gasped softly into his lips. His hand slid to her waist, firm, possessive, pulling her closer until there was no space left to pretend. The kiss broke only when breath became too precious. Rowan rested his forehead against hers, breathing hard. "If we go further," he said hoarsely, "I won't be able to give you half of myself." Eliza smiled, small, fearless. "I don't want half." He pulled away barely, placing his hands on her shoulders instead of where they desperately wanted to be. "Soon," he promised, "when the world isn't watching us fall apart." The next weeks were torture and heaven. Lingering looks, accidental touches that weren't accidental. Rowan teaching her how to ride, his hands guiding her hips, his breath warm at her ear. "You're doing it wrong," he murmured once. "Then show me," she challenged. He did. Too well. At night, Eliza began to understand her power, not beauty shaped by others' approval, but the kind that came from being wanted completely. Rowan watched her laugh more, speak louder, stand straighter. And the town noticed something else, too. The mountain man who once lived like stone now watched his wife like she was fire. And men who love fire will burn the world to keep it. But Pine Hollow didn't forgive easily, and someone decided that if Eliza Hawthorne, the unwanted daughter, could be broken once,
she could be broken again. Pine Hollow finally did what it always did best. It turned cruel. The whispers had changed tone. They were no longer curious. They were sharp, deliberate, hungry. Eliza felt it the moment she stepped into town alone for the first time. Eyes followed her, not dismissive now, but measuring, as if people were realizing too late that the girl they'd once laughed at now walked beside the most powerful man in the region, and that terrified them. At the dry goods store, a woman blocked her path. Tall, well-dressed, familiar. Margaret Bell, the preacher's niece, the woman who had once openly said Rowan Creed would eventually need a real wife. Margaret smiled sweetly. "So," she said, looking Eliza up and down slowly, deliberately, "so you're still here." Eliza met her gaze calmly. "I live here." Margaret's smile tightened. "Funny, everyone assumed this was temporary." "Everyone," Eliza replied softly, "has been wrong about me before." A few townsfolk nearby pretended not to listen. Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Men like Rowan don't stay satisfied. You should prepare yourself for disappointment." Eliza stepped forward, just enough. "You should prepare yourself," she said evenly, "for the fact that my husband doesn't belong to your imagination." Margaret flushed. The room went quiet. And then applause. Slow, deliberate. Rowan Creed stood in the doorway. The air shifted. Rowan's presence wasn't loud, it was absolute. He crossed the room without haste, stopping beside Eliza. His hand rested at the small of her back, claiming, protective. "Is there a problem?" he asked. Margaret opened her mouth. Rowan didn't give her the chance. "My wife is not a topic for your entertainment," he said calmly. "And if anyone here has questions about where she belongs, ask me." Silence. Rowan looked around the room slowly, deliberately. "She belongs with me, and she's staying." No one argued. They never did when Rowan Creed spoke like that. Outside, Eliza's breath finally shook loose. "You didn't have to come," she said. Rowan turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I felt it when they tried to corner you." His thumb brushed her wrist, grounding, familiar. "You okay?" She nodded, then, unexpectedly, laughed softly. "What?" "I used to dream of disappearing. Now people are angry I exist." Rowan's gaze darkened, not with anger, with pride. That night, the cabin felt alive. The fire burned brighter than usual. The wind pressed against the walls. Everything felt charged. Eliza stood by the table, loosening her hair from its braid. Rowan watched her, not hiding it anymore. "You stood your ground today," he said. She shrugged lightly. "I learned from you." Rowan stepped closer. "Careful," he murmured. "I don't set gentle examples." She turned to face him. "Good," she said. "I'm done being gentle for people who never were." Rowan's breath slowed. His hand rose, stopping inches from her cheek. "Tell me to stop," he said quietly. Eliza stepped into him instead. That was her answer. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing her jaw. He kissed her slowly, deeply, like this time he wasn't holding back, but still in control. Her fingers curled into his shirt. The kiss grew warmer. He lifted her effortlessly onto the table, not rough, but certain. His body caged hers without crushing her. "You're dangerous," he murmured against her lips. "So are you," she whispered back. His forehead rested against hers. "I've wanted you before you were mine," he admitted. "That scares me." Eliza touched his scarred cheek gently. "No one ever wanted me until you." Rowan closed his eyes just briefly. "You don't get to say that anymore, because I want you every way a man can want a woman, and I intend to keep choosing you." His mouth found hers again, slower this time, deeper. A promise, not a hunger. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, he rested his brow against her shoulder. "We go further," he said, voice low, "and the world won't matter anymore." Eliza smiled, steady, certain.
Then let it burn. Days later, Pine Hollow gathered for the winter market, and this time, Eliza walked beside Rowan openly, hand in hand. When a man muttered something cruel behind her back, Eliza stopped. She turned, and before Rowan could speak, she did. "I was sent here to be humiliated," she said clearly. "You failed." The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was stunned. Rowan looked at her like she'd just rewritten fate. That night, as snow began to fall, Rowan wrapped his coat around her shoulders. "My mountain," he said quietly, "has chosen you." Eliza leaned into him. "And I choose it back." Snow fell softly over the mountains, turning Pine Hollow white and silent. Eliza stood at the cabin window, watching the world slow down, the same world that once pushed her away, laughed at her, tried to erase her. Now it watched her differently, because she was no longer the girl sent as a joke. She was Rowan Creed's wife. Rowan came up behind her quietly, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. The warmth of him seeped into her bones, steady, protective, familiar. "You disappear when you think too much," he murmured. She smiled softly. "I was remembering who I used to be." His arms tightened just a little. "She doesn't live here anymore," he said. "You do." Eliza turned in his arms, looking up at him. The firelight caught the sharp lines of his face, the man the town feared, the mountain they respected. But she knew something no one else did, that Rowan Creed loved deeply, completely, without conditions. The knock at the door came 2 days later. Eliza felt it before she heard it. Rowan opened the door, and the air went cold. Her father stood there, eyes restless, pride bruised. Behind him, her stepmother and one of her sisters hovered, dressed well, uncomfortable, uncertain. "We came to see her," her father said stiffly. Rowan didn't move aside. "Shield aside," he replied calmly. Eliza stepped forward. For a moment no one spoke. Then her stepmother forced a smile. "Eliza, you look different." "I am," Eliza replied simply. Her father cleared his throat. "We heard you've settled." "I've built a life," Eliza said. "There's a difference." Silence pressed in. "We thought," her father said slowly, "that maybe you'd like to come home for winter." Rowan's jaw tightened, but Eliza spoke before he could. "This is my home." The words landed heavy. Her sister stared at her. "You were never meant for this." Eliza smiled, not bitter, not angry. "No," she said softly, "I was meant for more." She took Rowan's hand, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel small standing in front of them. They left shortly after, and they never came back. That night, the cabin felt warmer than ever. The storm outside howled, but inside there was only firelight, shadows, and the quiet truth between them. Rowan sat on the edge of the bed, pulling off his gloves slowly. Eliza watched him, the strength in his hands, the care in his movements. "You didn't hesitate," he said, "not even for a second." She knelt in front of him, resting her hands on his knees. "I spent my whole life trying to be chosen," she said, "and now I know I don't need their permission." Rowan's hands slid into her hair gently, reverently. "You were chosen the moment you walked into my life," he said. I just didn't know fate would be cruel enough to make you wait." He kissed her then, not rushed, not burning, but deep, lingering, full of promise. The kind of kiss that said, "I'm here. I'm not leaving." They lay together afterward, wrapped in blankets, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing slow circles on her arm. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Marrying me?" He sounded almost amused. "No," she said. "Letting yourself love." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I regret every year I lived without you." Eliza closed her eyes, smiling through tears. Spring came slowly. With it came change. People stopped whispering. They started watching with respect. Eliza became known not as Rowan Creed's wife, but as the woman who stood beside him. She laughed more, spoke freely, loved openly. And Rowan, the mountain man who once lived like stone, softened only for her. He touched her like she was precious, looked at her like she was rare, loved her like he would lose the world without her. One evening, standing on the ridge at sunset, Rowan wrapped his arms around her from behind. "You know," he said, "they sent you here to disappear." Eliza leaned back into him. "And instead," he kissed her temple, "you became everything." She turned, resting her forehead against his. "Then promise me something," she said. "Anything. Never stop choosing me." Rowan smiled, slow, certain. "I will choose you," he said. "In every lifetime they tried to deny you." They called her unwanted. They sent her away as a joke. But the mountain didn't laugh. It kept her. And in loving her, it finally learned